Hello and welcome. I am Oyiza Adaba. Today we're talking about the Plateau State massacres. At least 17 communities in the region of Bokos and Barkin local government areas were attacked on the 23rd and the 24th of December, leaving at least 200 people dead with over 500 wounded. The attackers, who used guns and machetes, burnt down houses and properties, and no group so far has claimed responsibility for this. Since 2014, attacks on Hausa farmers in the region have been blamed on semi nomadic Fulani herders who have long complained that farmers are taking over grazing lands. Crucial for their survivals. To talk more on these challenges and these clashes that have resulted in so much pain and hardship is with Emmanuel Ogebe. He's a human rights lawyer and an international advocate for these kinds of matters. Emmanuel, you're welcome to the show.
In 2014, in 2010, I was, in my office in Washington, D.C., when a colleague drew my attention to a New York Times article reporting a massacre that occurred in Plateau State. So, this same state we're talking about, and about 500 people have been killed. And he said, "Look, what are you doing? Your women and children are being slaughtered." And so I decided to take a 1 year break to work on this pro bono. And now it's been 15 years. Literally, I couldn't stop because each year it got worse, worse, and worse. And so, as you can see, in the report that you just showed, another 200 people were slaughtered on Christmas, around the Christmas period. And this is a triple digit casualty, and the world isn't paying attention.
It's interesting that you end with that because we were just talking about the Pope's message and how he mentioned what was going on in Ukraine and what was going on in the Middle East with Hamas and Israel. And again, there's no mention of what is going on in Africa, in places like Nigeria where Christians are being slaughtered. I mean, it's across Christian religious lines now, I would say. And so, what do you think? I mean, you've been around, you've seen coverage from the West and also from back home. What can you attribute to this disparity in covering of our news? Because it's not just going on in Nigeria. Congo is affected, Sudan, South Sudan, Cameroon. The conflicts are continuous.
Well, it's sad to say, but the Pope actually created more problems for Nigeria's Christians in this season than helping. Not only did the massacres in Nigeria not draw his attention, but basically his pronouncements on uh, same-sex blessings has created additional strain on the church in Nigeria. You see, unfortunately, in the West, they have so much luxury that they have esoteric rights they want to pursue, while are still at basic rights like freedom of religion, freedom to worship. And so I think the Pope has a lot more work to do to address what is happening to his church, even in Nigeria. Many years ago, I want to say at least 7 years ago, the Roman Catholic Diocese for Borno reported that 50 out of 51 churches in their diocese had been destroyed by Boko Haram. That is a threat of existential proportion. And that's what the church should be looking at now, not going into doctrinal, controversy. But that said, let me even mention that apart from the neglect that we see with regard to the situation in Nigeria by the international media and others, even when it is reported, it is misreported. The narrative is false, and I want to make that abundantly clear. This is not a competition for resources. If you come into my home to rob me at night, it is not a clash. And it is not a competition over my resources. You are trying to steal from me. What we have in Plateau State, and has been going on consistently in the middle belt of Nigeria in particular, is this terrorist coming to communities and kill sleeping grandmas and slash, little kids. When I was in Nigeria in December, we're talking about a few weeks ago, I met up with a child who, were helping with his medical bills. His hand was slashed with a machete. It hung only by a fragment of skin. And this boy was 9 years old. How could this boy conceivably be clashing with anyone over scarce resources? You can't come into my home and my land and kill me, and we say it's a competition for resources. And so this is part of the false narrative that has been built that helps the West not to recognize genocide and make it look like, oh, this is just Africans fighting. No, it is not. And so we need to not only elevate the issue, but we need to clarify the issue, because this is genocide on steroids.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you. We still hear narratives like bandits. And I'm like, really? Those are not bandits. Those are downright terrorists.
Yes.
And it's really sad for me in particular, because Jos is a place that I love so much.
Yes.
Plateau State is our home. We
Yes.
grew up there,
Exactly.
and it is such a beautiful. It's the New York of Nigeria, because it's such a melting pot, not just for Nigerians but for internationals. We had great weather in Jos, so everyone convened in Jos and everyone lived peacefully up until a point.
Yes.
Can you take us through, speaking about correcting narratives now, can you take us through a chronological breakdown of what happened? How did we get here?
Well, now this is slightly difficult to do because the attacks have been going on for so long. I can tell you that the biggest attack with the highest casualties was Dugona Hawa in 2010. And so at least for 14 years straight, we've had massacres of this nature with triple digit casualties. There are a few that are less than triple digits. But one individual is a major trauma for one family. And so I can tell you, for instance, that Plateau State is not the only state that has suffered this. In 2018, there was a similar massacre in Plateau State. Over 200 people were slaughtered in one weekend. And I had a relative who his wife, his 4-year-old daughter, and his 6-year-old son were all slaughtered. And this Christmas, I had his daughter with me in Nigeria on Christmas Day when we heard of more attacks in her community that killed 200 more. And as we speak, I haven't gotten to that point to confirm if she lost any more relatives. So this is how vicious the cycle is. It keeps going on. But let me just give a bit of a background, because here's what happened. In 1804, the Fulani nomadic jihadi group invade parts of what is now northern Nigeria. And they conquered some kingdoms and set up their fiefdoms or their caliphate over those kingdoms. Subsequently, the British came in and partnered with the Fulani Caliphate to rule parts of northern Nigeria. And then in 1914, the Brits amalgamated southern Nigeria and northern Nigeria. And when they were leaving in the 60s, they essentially rigged the census and the political system to give the northern parts of the country dominance over the south of the country. So that is the framework under which the current atrocities occur, because the Fulani jihadists believe that they have conquered Nigeria. and so to them belongs the spoil. And because of the way Nigeria was configured to place them above Nigeria, they feel that they can take anyone's land at will. So sadly, Nigeria has been described as one of Britain's greatest mistakes in Africa. And we can see that right now. When you see communities being slaughtered, and we're not talking, this is not a war. This is not Gaza. But we're having Gaza level fatalities on innocent civilians, unprovoked. And so this needs to be addressed. It's no longer sustainable for communities to be slaughtered at will.
All the way up to the presidency. And we seem to hear the same type of rhetorics, the same shared words, the thoughts and prayers. When is it going to be the last? When is it going to be the last thoughts and prayers being
Yeah.
sent out to Nigerians like this?
Yes. Okay. So before I address that, I did want to quickly relate to a point you made about us growing up in Jos and everything. Jos is literally the only place in Nigeria where people are proud to say, I was born there, I lived there. And incidentally, one of the questions I get a lot from Americans who were born in Jos is, hey, do I have Nigerian citizenship because I was born in Jos? And I have to break it to them, unfortunately, no, you can't. But Americans who were born in Jos, Brits who were born in Jos, they love it. They have associations, they get together, and so on and so forth. And I'll tell you this, right now, we're in the midst of putting together a humanitarian medical airlift to Nigeria. And we walked through the New Year holiday having meetings to put it together. Why? Because I called an American who was born in Jos. His parents were medical missionaries in Jos when he was born. And he just took ownership of this project, called all his contacts, and we're working on it right now. So I just wanted to add that to the question you asked earlier about how Jos is very special to us. But coming back to
Absolutely.
the inaction that we see, again, I'm just really baffled. There was a terror attack in Israel on October 7th, and the world is still shaking from the ramifications of the Israeli response to the attack and kidnapping of the people. And there was a terrorist attack in Nigeria, Christmas Day, and as we speak, there has been no response. There has been no arrest. That's why I say Nigerians' lives are valueless, dead or alive, because their own government cannot even rise on their behalf to protect them. And so basically, we're all just sitting awaiting slaughter. There's no plan, there's no protection. I watched the military guy saying, oh, I thought we had an understanding, so this would not happen. We're overwhelmed. I'm like, what the heck does that mean? It doesn't compute into anything. As military, you're called to exterminate and protect, not to create understanding. That's not your job. And when you say you're overwhelmed, what do civilians who don't have arms, what will they say? So they don't even strike the right notes in their responses. And that's, the crisis in which Nigeria is right now. If there was no army, these people would have the ability and the responsibility to protect themselves. But now they have an army that is failing them in that context as well. And so, a lot needs to be done. Nothing on the ground right now is doing what it's meant to do. We have complete and utter system failure. Now, let me add two things that a lot of people don't realize about this attack. The terrorists wrote to the communities and told them, you're not going to enjoy your Christmas. You're going to run with your food in your hands. So this was premeditated, and this was alerted, and still it happened. Now, what is even worse is, apart from, this scenario, the attackers operated for several days unchecked. So we're seeing utter impunity, being conducted, and they're leaving. Now, one final point I wanted to make here is while we're in Nigeria and these attacks were happening, we were commemorating the bombing of the Catholic Church, Saint Teresa's. And the sad thing is that there's so much impunity in Nigeria that even though St. Teresa's bombing was one of the only attacks where the terrorists were arrested, but it is my understanding that the guy who was arrested escaped from prison at a point. I think he was later recaptured, I'm not sure. And then I think he was again released in a prisoner swap or something. So there's no justice in place for victims.
Emmanuel, honestly, talking to you and listening to all that is happening and hearing it through you is truly depressing. It really is. I wanted to take you back to another story that you did. It's not in Jaws, but it's related, and that was the beheading of one of the pastors, the Christian Association of Nigeria pastor. That beheading was done. The video went viral. People saw it around the world, and there was outcry, and then there was silence. And the silence led up to his daughter getting married a few months ago. Please tell us a little bit about that experience.
Yes, actually, the wedding was, I want to say, about 2 weeks ago. So it was the week before Christmas. And, as you rightly point out, the video of Pastor Lawan Andemi went viral because he calmly, said, "Hey, if you can pay my ransom, please do. If not, I'll see you in heaven." And who does that? It was such a very calm, measured proof of life video. And unfortunately, even though the leaders of Cannes said they raised the money, they were ready to pay it, he was still beheaded by the terrorists on video, which, was shown around the world. And you would think, with that very public beheading, that there would be sympathy and support for the family. And I kid you not, earlier last year, we had to chip in for the rent. And I was asking, like, I said, don't you guys get any support? And they said, yeah, we get support from his former denomination where he was pastor. That's 30,000 naira a month. That's below the minimum wage of Nigeria. I mean, for a family, I think they have like 9 kids, 4 or 5 of whom are in college. And so when I heard, when they invited me for the wedding, I, of course, called up several pastors. I said, look, you guys got to show up. And when I didn't have any positive feedback that anyone was going to be there, I made the very difficult choice to travel to Nigeria for the wedding. And we got there, and I'm so glad we did because no one showed up for them. No one showed up for them. And it broke my heart because it tells me that we're not serious as a people. In other societies, look at, for example, the 4 girls who were slaughtered in a bombing at the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, Alabama. Last year was the 60th anniversary, and the first Black Supreme Court Justice, female, went for the anniversary. And we have, the same thing happening in Nigeria, and nobody remembers them. As a society, we have to do better. And I keep saying that if we don't value our own lives, it will be very difficult for others to value our lives for us.
Honestly, it's truly remarkable the work that you do. Thank you so much for showing up there. How these people sleep at night is
Mm,
completely beyond me.
hmm.
Can you tell us how is there a kitty that people can donate to, or how can people be a part of this mission? How can people help?
Yeah, that's a good question. I told you what we're trying to do from the US here right now is we already have a ton of medical supplies. So we're working to try and airlift them to Nigeria. Going by sea freight will be easier, but it would be cheaper, but it will take much longer, and the need is very severe in Plateau. We were there on a medical mission in October, and we visited IDP camps in Benue, in Plateau, in Nasarawa, and Abuja. It's so heartbreaking to see countless people, in huts and in tents, and some don't even have tents, so they're in the open. Now, guess what? In Plateau, it's worse because of the cold. It's winter right there. We actually have hail in Plateau. To show you, most people don't know what hail is. It's not snow. Snow is nice and soft and cushy. Hail is rocks, ice blocks falling on people. And so, talking with officials over the past couple of days, they need medicine, they need accommodation, they need food, they need clothing. Yeah, because these are people who ran with the clothes on their back. Their attacks were in the night. So you are in a nightie or a singlet. You don't even have your coat or jacket, to keep you warm from the cold. So at this point, I suggest that, people who have clothing, send clothing to Joss and so on and so forth. Our operation right now is from the US, so there's not much people in Nigeria can do with regard to what we're doing from here. But I'm sure that there are local communities and centers that they can connect through. One of them would be Stephanos Foundation in Jos. They're a 20 plus years old organization. They do great relief work, and we've been happy to partner with them over the years.
Okay, wonderful. It's good that we have somewhere to point people to, and somewhere that would get it in the hands of the people that
Yeah.
need it the most.
Yeah.
Um, from the US side, what can you tell if you had an opportunity to speak to the government of the US, for example? What would you say is happening in Nigeria, and how can they step in and intervene?
Well, for the US, it's not that they don't know, but they're actively lying about the situation. Um, Last year, an American woman was abducted, by Fulani headsmen in Jos Plateau State. And probably, even though you're in the news, this is the first you're hearing about it because the US government shut it down. All the atrocities that occur involving American citizens in Nigeria are covered up for the US's own reasons that we do not understand. Now, I can say to them, that woman was not uh, clashing with the Fulanese over scarce land resources. She was an American who was there teaching and helping and all of that when she was abducted by these people. So the US needs to get real about the situation. Stop attacking those of us who tell you the truth about what's happening. Stop lying in the narrative that this is a conflict over land. It's not. What is happening in Gaza is a conflict over land, and you acknowledge it and you are trying to help. What is happening in Nigeria is genocide and jihad. You need to acknowledge it and intervene. The US is not providing aid in the Middle Belt. They're providing aid in the Northeast, where Boko Haram is doing what it's doing, but not aid in the Middle Belt, where the Fulani terrorists are doing what they're doing.
Do you have any final thoughts? That's what I forgot to ask you. Do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, I really want to emphasize to the people of Nigeria, that we must not lose our conscience and our humanity. We may have lost our democracy and so on and so forth, but the core of what makes us human, let's retain that. Let's respond, to the people who are suffering around us, and that has eternal value. There's a lot we can do for ourselves in this life, but there's a lot more God can do for us when we intervene on behalf of His children in crisis. So let's make this year a happier new year, not just by proclaiming it, but by doing something about it.
Well said. Thank you again, Emmanuel Ogebe, for your time today. And we look forward to talking to you under better circumstances. Do take care. Thank you for joining us on AR Report. I am Oyiza Adaba. See you next time.